Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome SHERYL WUDUNN, Seth Rogen, and Lauren Miller Rogen.
Thank you very much. We have so little time, so I'm just going to dive in with the questions. So my first question is, when did you first get the idea for both Hilarity for Charity and for Alzheimer's?
Well, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's almost 10 years ago, and I spent the first 5 or so years of her diagnosis feeling quite helpless and really depressed and sad. And then almost 5 years ago now, a friend of ours came to us and said, let's do a variety show and let's raise money for Alzheimer's. And so we thought, okay, even though that sounded a little daunting at the time. And so we had our first variety show just over 4.5 years ago, and Hilarity for Charity was born.
So Hilarity for Charity does a lot of things. You do care, you do support, you do research. What kind of role does advocacy play in this, in HFC?
Well, you know, with any major disease or struggle that needs attention, you need to become an advocate. You need as many people as can be talking about it to, like our video shows, force the government to increase funding. And so our goal at Hilarity for Charity is to get young people involved in the fight against Alzheimer's, which is sort of, there's been a bit of a hole for young people to have a voice in Alzheimer's. And so our focus is to get young people to start talking about it, become advocates for it, and hopefully change the course that it's currently on.
So the name of this panel is Strategic Advocacy. So what is the difference between advocacy and strategic advocacy? Tell me a little bit about the strategic part.
Are these working?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I think, well, we went to target young people and more millennial generations. That, I think, was our strategy, and to use our only strength, really, which was creating comedy, as the way to target those people. We knew that to the maybe older generations, we were not the people you would be listening to about this. And we also knew that, our brand of humor also probably did not speak to those people necessarily as much as it spoke to the younger generation. And so it really was the only way that we thought we could, in an organic, in a remotely organic way, advocate for our cause, because it was the thing that we did. If we went around all of a sudden, throwing very serious, somber events or something like that, doing the traditional charity event where people get up and talk and, and we ask for money and they tell their stories and it's just very sad, it just wouldn't, have attracted anyone that we talked to or reached to come to our events, and it wouldn't have been different in any way from other events, and it wouldn't have separated our advocacy from any of the other ones, which again weren't really targeting people our age.
Okay, so 2 questions out of that. So one is that obviously Alzheimer's is a very serious, sad, disease condition. So how do you bring humor and comedy to it without poking fun? How do you do that?
Well, our first event, which was 4.5 years ago, I don't know if we mentioned the word Alzheimer's once, which probably wasn't the greatest thing, but sort of what Seth just touched on, which is just we try to bring what we know to it. And so we throw these events and other programs, and sometimes when something is so sad, all you can do is laugh, and we certainly don't poke fun at Alzheimer's, but we just try to throw something that is fun and then get in there messages like our PSA that you just saw, or different speakers that come and talk about the reality of the disease. And it's really a balance to find how much you can do with the reality of it, and then also how much you can sort of trick people to paying attention by telling some jokes.
Yeah, but I don't think, it's pretty easy to not make fun of it, and so I think, like Lauren says, it's like a spoonful of sugar in a way. If you present something that you do not want to think about in a package that is actually quite inviting to think about or to participate in, or something that you'd actually be excited to go attend, not just on the scale of charity events, but on the scale of like ways you'd be wanting to spend your night anyway. That to us was like a very important overall part of our way of doing things, is to reach out to people and get people to do things that they maybe would be doing anyway, just do it in support of our cause, basically.
Okay, so can you share with the audience a little part of your routine? Tell us some jokes.
Sure, they're familiar with it by now.
One?
I don't have jokes. I'm not a stand-up comedian. I stopped doing stand-up when I was.
We hire comedians
when I was
to come
16
so
years
he doesn't
old.
do it.
Yeah, we hire comedians, or we beg our friends who are comedians to come do shows to perform at our event.
Well, how about sharing one of their jokes?
I mean, I can't do that. I mean, last year, what we try to do is try to have themes for the events that are fun. So our last year's theme was, I'm good friends with James Franco, and he's never had a bar mitzvah, and so we threw him a bar mitzvah at the event. And we actually threw him a real bar mitzvah. And we got like, me and Jeff Goldblum circumcised him, which was, but again, it really, those are the types of themes and ways that we try to make the events, stand out from other charity events, and to truly become the type of thing that, again, you would go to whether or not it was benefiting a charity.
And did you mention the A word?
The A word? We did this time,
yes,
and we actually had someone come up and tell their sad story, so it was not that different from a real charity event in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. So about the audience, you want to reach the young people because that is your audience already, but what do you think and hope that the young people will do?
Well, the rate at which Alzheimer's is growing is quite scary. At this point, it's around 5.6 million Americans, but by 2050, I think they estimate around 15 million Americans will have Alzheimer's. So the people who need to be fighting that are the young people. We will be the people facing it then, whether it's being diagnosed ourselves or as caregivers. So it's really important to engage young audiences now to get them involved, perhaps in a fun way, and then they say, hey, this is something really serious. I really need to help become an advocate for it so I can avoid having that future become a reality.
Yeah, and that also, starts above that. Like, when we were in Washington, actually, one of the most discouraging things that I was told is that a lot of young people don't even consider going into Alzheimer's research that great a path because of how underfunded it is. And just on a financial level, you're not as likely to get the type of things that you would get if you went into AIDS research or cancer research or things like that. Things that already have a lot of treatments and, that can help you live your entire life, unlike Alzheimer's, which has zero treatment. And so that was something that, again, you have to inspire young people to hopefully do it anyway, and also hopefully that will reach the people who control that money, and and that will inspire more people to do it as well.
Well, you must be able to, you got doors open everywhere. So who would you want to reach if you really, who are the key people to reach to influence the Alzheimer's research? And part of your charity does do research or helps with research.
Honestly, what we need are the masses. We need walks that shut down cities. You need large amounts of people writing to their congressmen and their senators to increase funding. Currently, Alzheimer's gets $900 million from the government, which is wonderful, and they increased it by $300 million last year from close to 600 million to 900. But diseases that are very worthy, like cancer, HIV, AIDS, get in the billions. And Alzheimer's needs to get that. And the only way it's going to happen is with a large, massive group of advocates constantly talking about it, walking about it, raising money for it, and influencing the government to do it.
Politicians do what get them votes, as you can see. And so, and if it seems like they will get more votes, if Alzheimer's is a thing people care about, then they will do something about it. And right now, for many reasons, it's just, it's not like a very cool disease to care about. There's very little hope associated with it. There's no person you can say, I was cured of Alzheimer's, come give more money to this because more people will be cured. It's not even there yet. And so it really is, there's a lot of roadblocks that we're trying to overcome. But the biggest thing that we're trying to do is just talk about it a lot and hope that someone who knows how to do one of these things maybe better than we do will hear us and say, hey, I know how to fix this, or I can help do this. And that's all we can do is talk about it, because it's just our personal experience that we're going through. And and you know, and that alone makes people feel better. We've been told, because very few people talk about it, and so it seems like just talking about it is the best thing we can be doing for our advocacy.
Well, there's a huge number. I mean, you put the 5 million already. I mean, that's a larger base than a lot of other diseases. So what is holding people back?
Well, for whatever reason, there is a large stigma associated with Alzheimer's disease. A lot of people consider it mental illness, which for whatever reason still has stigma, which I don't quite understand, because everyone has a brain. Everyone experiences things, and brain health is still such a mystery and still has such a stigma around it in general. And so I think people are afraid. I mean, my own mom didn't want us to tell anyone for the first few years of her diagnosis. She was embarrassed, and you know, and we told her there's nothing to be embarrassed about. This is an illness and a disease. Let us help you fight it and talk about it. And you know, I think part of what we try to do is to tear down the stigma. It's a part of life, disease, health. It's part of something we all need to care about, and we should all be talking about all the time. And fighting that stigma is definitely a wall that we're up against. Like Seth said, there's no cute baby to put in front of our cause. There's no survivor to put in front of our cause, and that's scary. It's not uplifting. It's not happy or fun. And so it's fighting against that, which is a big challenge.
So the two of you, you know, you're major Hollywood figures. Why wouldn't you use movies to do this? Why can't there be a major feature film about this?
There was.
There was. Still Alice was, of course, an amazing, huge step forward, I think, in how the disease is portrayed in the media, and was a beautiful film and really showed a great reality of the disease. Unfortunately, Alzheimer's is quite misunderstood and unfortunately very misrepresented in a lot of television and film. And yes, eventually one of us will do an Alzheimer's film.
Or television.
Yeah, and we try. I mean, in 50/50, one of the characters has Alzheimer's, a movie we made a few years ago. It's things that we, again, in our own way, have been subtly trying to put in our work. And as filmmakers, I think there's probably, again, people who are better suited to do that than me, my wife being one of them. And so it really, again, I think that will help. But that will only be, you know, like Philadelphia, the movie probably did a huge thing for the AIDS community, you know, and so I don't know but again, that is something that had a lot of hope associated with it, and there were things that could be done, and this is so much before that even, that I don't know if a movie is going to be the thing that makes the government put like billions and billions and billions more dollars into this.
Although it would be a start.
It'd be a great start.
Right, so Seth, you went to Congress. Tell us about that experience. What was it like? You referenced it.
Yeah, it was, that thing at the beginning was part of my speech at Congress. It was interesting. It was very nice to be invited. Very few senators show up to these things, and which is bizarre, because the whole thing is put in place so they can get a face-to-face interaction with the people who are advocating for a cause. And then what you find is like, oh, they don't come. They send someone to come and give them a recap of the face-to-face interaction that their aide had with the person who was there, which really explains a lot. And so it was very discouraging in some ways, because you're like, oh, they don't care. They didn't even come, you know. But then it went on to become
the second most watched C-SPAN video of all time.
Yeah.
Second behind Obama's first inauguration, in front of his second inauguration.
I beat his second one. It was old news by then. But,
yeah. But it just shows how
the fact that I was at Congress was more surprising than that Obama won a second time. But yeah, so it was great that a huge amount of people watched the speech, and for like a brief moment, it might have been like a remotely zeitgeisty kind of cool thing to talk about, which is more than probably could have been said in the previous many years. But again, it didn't translate into a huge amount of actual money at this point. But that being said, our hope is that some young person saw that video, and maybe in several years we will see the fruits of what that inspired them to do in some
Well,
capacity,
we have a college program,
Yeah.
HFCU, in which college people can throw their own events and raise money for Alzheimer's, and that was actually one of the largest platforms to start that program.
Yeah.
So that was a direct result from that.
Well, so patient advocates tend to be a real, moving, voice. But can you really use Alzheimer's patients to come out and advocate for you, or maybe people are early?
It's very hard.
Yeah, we were at a beautiful event, Part the Cloud, this past weekend up in Silicon Valley, and there was a man who was in the early stages of dementia, and he spoke, and it was incredibly moving. You know, once someone gets in the advanced stages, no. We're in production on a documentary right now, which is called This Is Alzheimer's, which is a very honest portrayal of different stages of the disease. My mom, family in Michigan, in which Ken Dotson was diagnosed at 30 years old with Alzheimer's, and then also focuses on a facility here in Los Angeles for people in a different range of stages of the disease. So it is important to put the reality of the disease out there, which is hard because when someone gets advanced, it's not uplifting.
It's very rare to, you know, in the years we've, 5 or 6 years, we've been pretty like hot on the Alzheimer's advocacy trail. I think we've probably seen maybe 2 people with Alzheimer's actually speak publicly in that time. It almost never happens. Again, there's a huge amount of shame associated with it, and if you're in any way advanced, you literally can't do it. And so that is, again, one of the many roadblocks that we are trying to overcome in.
Well, what do you think it will take to change that dynamic? Because certainly with other, afflictions, and we'll hear more about AIDS later, but, how do you move that? How do you shift that inflection point?
I mean, it's not easy. I think it's just important to humanize it. It's important to continue talking about it and bring...
Destigmatize it?
Yeah, the people that can still talk about it should talk about it. If someone is in the early stages, we would hope that they don't feel the shame about it, even though I'm sure they do, but that they can overcome it to put themselves out there, because that is what does get attention, and talking about it. You know, it's about humanizing it through film and television, through different articles, through different advocates.
Through people like us just speaking about it. I mean, and I think that it's one of those things that people don't talk about a lot, but once you do start talking about it, like me as just a person in my life, more often than people telling me they appreciate my work as a lowball comedian, they tell me that they appreciate what we do for Alzheimer's, and that they just are so appreciative to hear people talking about it, because very few people do. And I think that is the right path, is to just normalizing it, making it a part of the everyday conversation that takes place in this country, and having it become an issue that is not like something that people whisper about, but becoming something that people really aggressively seek to do something about.
So, final question, where are we closest to a solution? Is there any place in the country, any institution or university where they are at least the closest to a solution or an antidote?
We're not scientists, but there are a number of treatments and studies and things that are happening out there, but nothing has ever crossed the line to work in a human. So there have been a lot of things that have worked in animals before, but unfortunately the funding just isn't there to have taken it across. However, scientists say that if the funding was there, a treatment could be found. And so that's what's most frustrating, is that we have to get the funding there, because it is possible. It's just not possible now with the level of funding and awareness that currently exists. Right.
Well, part of your charity also at least has a network to researchers. Do you, is there anyone that you can talk about? I mean, maybe that mice experiment or animal experiment?
No, I mean, we actually really focus on helping people. We have a program in which we provide grants for people who can't afford care. So our focus is really on helping people. We do donate to research, of course, and there are many great studies that are happening out there, but our focus is really to help people who are going through it.
The scientific side of this is not our strength as advocates or as people with the brains we have in our heads. It just seemed like our experience of it, and inspiring young people, hopefully, who understand science much better than we do, to be the ones who take it on themselves to do something about it.
Quickly, yes or no, should people get tested for it?
There's no definitive, there are certain genes. There's an early onset familial gene, which I think is a little bit more definitive that you have it. But the truth is there is no really one gene that says if you have this, you'll get it. And so it's sort of up to the person. If you want to know, great. If you don't, great. And I think there's nothing that points to it at this point that says you need to get tested so you know. And so I think it's just important that everyone become an advocate for it, because like I said, whether you're diagnosed with it or yourself, or you have to care for someone who has it, it will affect you. And being a caregiver is in many cases even harder than having disease.
Often the caregivers die before the person with the disease because of how hard it is on them.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maria Shriver, Mark Shriver, JALYSSA Alvarado, and Liz Simons.
Good morning. Thank you for attending this session. I know everybody here could be at a variety of different sessions, and you came to a session about advocacy. We're here to talk about early childhood education and the American mother. That's in between Alzheimer's and AIDS. So we're going to try to take 20 minutes to persuade you to care about this issue. So let me begin by talking with my brother Mark, who also happens to run Save the Children Action Network, and we partnered with them to create a poll on who the American mother is in 2016. And the results came back that she is resilient. She describes herself that way. Everything she's up against, she believes that she can raise children that are independent and caring, but that she doesn't think corporate America is helping her. She thinks education is the way out of poverty, and she will vote for political leaders who have that in their portfolio or who stress that. Mark, everybody here is going to be inundated these couple days about caring about different issues. Why should they care about the American mother and investing in early childhood ed?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you, Maria, for doing this panel.
Welcome.
I have to do that to keep everything good at the house. But no, seriously, thank you. I think the facts speak for themselves. I think the facts that you just talked about, where over 50% of the moms in this country are living paycheck to paycheck, and you brought this to the forefront a couple years ago, where 1/3 of the moms in this country are on the brink of poverty, and the kids that they're in charge of, 16 million children, for a total of 60 million people on the brink of poverty, is a huge issue. The fact that businesses and political organizations in this country aren't taking the needs of working moms into account and changing those are facts that speak to political leadership. But you need advocates. We just heard from the ROGENs about how important advocacy is. We need different voices at the table.
So what does advocacy look like in 2016? Does it involve writing your congressman, your senator, voting first and foremost, obviously, but what's it involve?
So my role model on this is our mother, and she was relentlessly on it. And I think you've got to write letters to the editor. You've got to, if you can make the time, actually go to the state capitol, go to City Hall. You've got to make a phone call. You've got to be engaged in the political arena. As Teddy Roosevelt said, the glory belongs to the person who gets in the arena and gets bloodied. But you've got to stay on it, because political leaders, don't listen to kids, generally. They don't listen to parents that don't vote. And poor children in this country don't have the political stance of an organization. That's why we created Save the Children Action Network. We want to be that voice with actors of all different backgrounds, people that are business folks, people that are moms, people that own small businesses in their community, and you've got to stay engaged in there. So it's a whole different array of tools and different voices, moms, people who have different experiences, and those that are here at the Milken Conference.
So Liz, let me ask you, you're involved as an activist and also as a philanthropist, and you could be involved in a whole host of issues. Why did you choose early childhood education to make your mark?
Well, it really started way before we started our family foundation. I used to be a school teacher. I taught in Redwood City, California. And the second graders who I taught needed to learn how to read. The principal explained that that was the year that those kids needed to learn to read, because they hadn't had preschool experiences. Some of them hadn't even been to kindergarten. And so I remember thinking, it's really too bad that we can't get them a little earlier, because that's a lot of pressure on those kids. And then I had my own children, and it was just amazing to me how much learning they were doing every minute of every day from the minute they were born. And so I saw how important it was, and then fast forward to 2007 when we started our foundation, we did a little digging, we hired some staff, and found out that, sure enough, those early years are tremendously important, not just for those children, but for all of us. Because children who have access to quality early learning experiences are less likely to be held back, less likely to be referred to special education, more likely to graduate from high school and less likely to end up in jail.
So when people say to you, well, that's all well and good, Liz, but we have to focus on, jobs, we have to focus on the environment, we have to focus on, making the world more bipartisan, we don't have time to focus on early childhood ed. What do you say?
I say that if we want to focus on all of those problems, we really have to start with children when they're young, from the very beginning of their learning. 90% of a child's brain is developed before that child is 5. And so it's just this lost opportunity if we don't seize it. And we also really want to address that achievement gap that we know begins before a child is 5, and it gets worse, not better. If we get kids off to the right start, my own kids and the kids that I taught in Redwood City have the possibility of having that right start.
Maria, if I could just interject for one sec. I mean, the fact that a kid living in poverty at the age of 4 is 18 months behind, developmentally behind our kids, my kids, we spend billions of dollars trying to remediate that. And in many cases, it doesn't happen.
Exactly.
So we could save so much money if we invested early. And these kids are, I mean, I think it's the
So you're talking
biggest
to a
crime.
business audience, and you're saying it's a smart investment.
It's the ROI is profound. And you show this chart that says brain growth, as Liz just said, 90% in the first 5 years of life, public investment almost flat. And I've showed that. I was in the state legislature in Maryland for 8 years. You show that to businessmen and women, and they see a huge loss opportunity.
Right.
So
And
why
can
we
I add-
don't invest is
Yeah.
an
Well, let me
outrage.
just say to Jalissa, because I think Jalissa is a living example of what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
she and I had an opportunity to speak yesterday. And you said that really you came from a situation where you didn't have role models as parents. You didn't really know what good parenting was. And you had children, and you didn't know what to do until someone from Save the Children came in and said, start reading out loud to your children. And that changed your entire trajectory as a woman, and it changed the trajectory of your children.
Yes. So Victoria came, and so now we read and do fun activities, and they learn from it. And I've just noticed the big difference from my oldest daughter before I even was involved with Save the Children, and now my youngest, she's like very advanced for her age, for being 4 years old. And just like she was saying, she wishes that there was preschool for the younger ones, and in my town there is, and it has helped my children very much.
What do you think would have happened to your children and to you had you not had that moment when somebody walked into your life and said, you can change the way your child becomes child ready by reading? Really simple.
They probably wouldn't know as much as they do now, and they probably wouldn't interact in reading as much either. So
I've often said to Mark, who talks a lot about obviously children and early childhood education, that helping the mother is a critical component of this, because you can educate a child, and if that child goes home to a house where the mother's in an abusive relationship, working 2 jobs, making minimum wage, in a stressed environment, that child can't even learn. So do you think it's important to, like, this poll focuses on who the mother is, what her concerns are, what her fears are, how she feels that it's harder today to raise a child than when her parents were raising a child, how she worries about technology, how she lives paycheck to paycheck? Are you trying to kind of take the country on a dual track to say education is important and this is who the mother is?
Absolutely, and the poll showed that mothers thought the most important issue was education. It was investing in early childhood education. It was making college affordable. So you need those facts. You need to use those facts when you go in and meet with a legislative leader. But you also need the personal story, and you need people that aren't the normal advocate.
So what is
people aren't expecting Liz to show up, and they're not expecting Alyssa to show up. They're expecting kind of me to show up,
Right.
but they don't listen to me. As Seth said, they don't show up at the meetings.
They don't listen to you?
No, I know, it's outrageous.
Mark, I don't know what's up with that.
And they don't listen to America, because every demographic that Mark has polled shows that people not only care about early childhood, but they're willing to pay for it. They understand that it's important. But as a country, we only support it so much less than other developed countries in the world.
So where's the disconnect? Where is if people say that they'll invest in it, if you're going to Capitol Hill, right? You have the poll, you have the facts. How important are the facts in persuading lawmakers and audiences and businesses to care?
I think the facts make a huge difference, but I think the personal presence is a bigger issue. I think her story, as we just heard, that's a real story. That touches people that are an elected official. And you've got to apply political pressure.
Absolutely.
What does that look like?
That looks like going to town hall meetings when your state rep, I was a state rep for 8 years. If 5 mothers showed up, and they brought a businessman and a couple of other business folks into my office, 7 or 8 people, I paid attention.
Right.
And then if they sent me follow-up notes, which Liz does relentlessly, if they are on the issue, the combination of the facts with the personal commitment is what moves people.
We support a group called Moms Rising. That's one of the advocacy groups we support, and they do all these kind of creative things, like they write messages on cupcakes that they give to their Congress people. You know, they like the messages could say like "help children" or and so you've got to get those untraditional, but also you've got to mobilize the stakeholders, the moms.
I think there's so many people here in this day and age when people seem to be inundated with information, inundated with causes. How do you stand out? How do you make your issue the one to care about? We're in an election year, and in the poll it said that mothers, and 10 million more women voted in the last election than men. So this presidential election will be decided by women. How do you get, and that's a really important thing, yeah, for a whole host of reasons, but since we're focused on you now, how do you get them really to focus on this, really? Because everybody's on Capitol Hill. There are people in there, you know, the Rogens are in there on Alzheimer's, right? You know, Kathy might be in there on AIDS. People are in there on climate change. How do you stand out in 2016?
I think it's a doing a couple of different things at the same time, Maria. But I've said it before. It's also being relentless. I think, you know, for kids, there isn't an NRA for kids. And that's what we want to be. We want to be the NRA for kids. We want to raise political money, which people don't want to talk about. We want to be involved in elections. We want to tell people if they're not supporting kids' issue, the early childhood issue, we're going to spend political money to defeat you. And we are going to mobilize a small army, because that's what changes. It's that old Margaret Mead line, right? Don't ever doubt the power of a few committed people to change the world.
It's the only thing that ever has.
It's the only thing that ever has. So if you took the front row here.
No, but let's focus. You're an action network. You're an advocacy. So those are 3 things you want these people in this audience to do with you.
That's
Give you money, join you on the ground, going to town halls, supporting candidates who talk about early childhood education and or withholding their vote if they don't.
That's it. Yep. And use their voice in the public arena. Can they write an op-ed? Can they write a letter to the editor? Can they show up at a town hall meeting? Can they tell their story? I mean, I've tried to have meetings on the Hill, and the senators won't take them. You bring people from their state or their district, wow, the door opens up.
JALYSSA, you and I were talking yesterday, and you said that you went out and you've started speaking, and that women come up to you, hear your story, and then are inspired to use their voice or change their life. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I just finished college, and so I did get to speak on the opening ceremony, and I told my story, how I was raised by my grandparents. I don't know who my father is, and my mother was absent. So I just wanted them to know that even though that they had a bad past, that they can do good for their children. They can still go back to school and be able to get a good education to provide for them. And so they just told me that it's inspired them. So.
And you were saying that you've just gotten a job offer, and you're trying to figure out, your husband who's here works 2 jobs to help the family, and that you want to be able to support him and support the family, but you're struggling with how to, you know, get daycare, and will that be more expensive? Who will do that? How do you work? How do you be a parent?
Yeah, it's not so much having to pay for the daycare or anything. It's about having to step away and go to work and missing what my children will be doing. Like, I've always been there since day one, and any little thing that I do miss, it like kind of hurts. So, but I feel if I were to work and my husband were able to work 1 job, it would give us more time as a family. And so my children could have more time with their father, and we can do more family things.
You said to me yesterday, I asked you, does the moniker, the resilient American mom, feel good to you? Is that, because we've heard, you know, over the years, we're the security moms, we're the soccer moms, we're the flipped out moms, we're the, you know, all these, but the resilient American mother is someone you identify with.
Oh yeah, I love hearing that, because my children can grow up saying that they had a really good mom, And I was always there for them because I'm not able to say that.
Mark, corporate America, there's a lot of business leaders here. Mother said that they felt corporate America was making their jobs nearly impossible.
Yeah.
Business leaders here, what could they do that would change the lives of the workforce that works for them?
Well, I think we saw in the poll, which again, using the statistics, is the issue of sick leave, right? That was a huge issue. Maternity and paternity leave for certain demographics was also a big issue. I think our political structure, our business structure, we need to look and be creative. Flex time. I mean, these are all, you just heard, Alyssa's real life situation. She wants some flexibility to be able to do her job, but to have impact on her family. So there are a couple of solutions that are out there that we need to look creatively at, and it's happening out there. I mean, the political structure and business structure are often laggards. They follow the people, but when you listen to the people, when you get the facts and you hear the stories, I think we're in the midst of a revolution out there.
And you're working, so if people, when you walk off of this stage, want to come up to talk to you, you're working on the local level. Yep. With different political situations locally, where change often happens before it happens on a national level.
We're in school board races because they're deciding how to spend resources locally on school systems. So we're in school board races, we're in state delegate races, state Senate races, as well as federal issues.
And I think it's important to clarify too that in the business community, there's a lot of understanding that it's not just good for those moms, it's good for their own businesses.
That's 100% right.
Because that keeps the employees loyal to the company, and it keeps them able to do the best job they can if they know they're also able to be there for their families.
So that, would you say to business leaders also, one of the things we found when we polled women over the years, just having a boss or someone in their business acknowledge their situation, know that they're trying to parent, know that they're trying to act as a caregiver to an aging parent, know that they might be a single mom, that went a long way in keeping them at that company, communicating.
Yeah, absolutely. We heard, actually, I was at a paid family leave event at SurveyMonkey not long ago, and executives from Change.org, from Facebook and Zendesk all spoke on how they were implementing even more generous paid family leave than other places have in California, and that it was making a huge difference for them competitively.
So Mark, kind of, how do we get out of the kind of talk phase? Here we are, we're in a political year, right? You have two candidates. Now John Kasich just dropped out, maybe while you were all here in one of these rooms. So we have Donald Trump and we have Hillary Clinton. Do you think Donald Trump is going to start talking about early childhood ed?
Well, we've been
He has a female issue, so that might be something you should go talk to him about.
Well, it's interesting actually, Maria, because as you know, about 10 days ago, when Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Clinton, was asked the 5 things she wants to push forward if she were elected, number 2 was a high-quality early childhood system for America. So we, have been meeting with her staff, talking to her. I mean, she's been very strong on this issue for a number of years, but we've been pushing it with Democrats and Republicans on the federal and state level, because this used to be called a women's issue. It's a political issue. It cuts across. It is not a women's issue. It is, as Liz said, it's good for business. It's good for the economy. It is good for families.
It's a social justice issue.
It is, I think, the biggest social justice issue out there. When you've got a kid at 4 years of age and is 18 months behind my kid, and we spend billions of dollars trying to remediate that, and that's not even competing against the Chinese or the Europeans where they do invest, Scandinavian countries. We've got to do something about it. We're just wasting billions of dollars.
Okay, and Mark will be here running around. You can come up and talk to him about his work on the ground in all 50 states, and Save the Children is working on the ground here in the United States and also all over the world. So I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I want to thank JALYSSA, who is really quite heroic in the way she is raising her children, breaking the cycle of poverty, bringing a new form of parenting to her own family, and Liz for using your voice and putting your money where your voice is to try to make a change politically and personally. So thank you all very much.
Please welcome back to the stage moderator SHERYL WUDUNN with panelist Kathy Ireland.
Hello. Hi, I don't know, is it working? Yes, okay, it's working. Well, I'm delighted to be here now with Kathy Ireland. I'm really a fan of yours. I'm very lucky to be able to talk with you. Thank you. You are a role model, Kathy, for a lot of young women who want to start a company and do as well as you. What has been your secret?
My secret is learning from great people. It's all about people, and I was privileged. First of all, thank you, and it is a privilege to be here today. And to speak about someone who is a hero to me. I'm blessed to have been mentored by Elizabeth Taylor. Some people talk about our relationship as friends. She was family. Extraordinary woman, so many lessons. And when the AIDS epidemic...
Well, can I actually, I want to get to that too, but
absolutely.
I would love to hear, people want to hear about how you, how you sort of had this wonderful trajectory. What has been your secret?
Perseverance, believing in what you're doing. I think having a passion for it. I tried and failed at many businesses before starting our company in 1993 with a single pair of socks. People said it was counterintuitive. They said it was stupid, a lot of other things. But really believing in what you're doing and answering the hows. How are you able to manufacture this pair of socks at this great value? What's going on behind the scenes? What's going on in the factories? Getting those questions answered, having a clarity on what are your values, what are your priorities, and putting clear boundaries in place to protect them because they will be challenged. And ultimately, it's all about people. So whether we're talking about traditional business or philanthropy, it's who we're working with, and that's been critical.
That's very interesting. So you have a very quick and clever business mind, and sometimes when business executives turn to philanthropy, they kind of check their thinking cap at the door. Why do you think that's the case, and how have you overcome that?
Well, if that is the case, I would assume it's because there's not a conviction. There's just not that passion. When you care deeply about something, you want to make sure that you get all your questions answered, how something is being accomplished. Elizabeth had a laser focus with her philanthropy, and I believe that is why with the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, she continues to be able to reach so many people. She specifically reached out to the disenfranchised, to those who were furthest away geographically from care, and reaching those who were discriminated against.
Well, so now getting into Elizabeth Taylor, well, first of all, what was it like to work with her?
Extraordinary. I feel like I continue to get lessons from heaven from Elizabeth. She knew her business like no other, so thorough, so passionate. She gave. And what inspires me most about Elizabeth is her fearlessness, her courage at a time when people didn't even want to mention the word AIDS. It was Elizabeth who got President Reagan to mention it for the first time.
How did she do that?
Elizabeth had a way of getting things done when she believed in it. And she kind of had that way of applying pressure in such a beautiful way that no one else could do. She didn't care what public opinion said. This was a time when HIV, AIDS, they were calling it the gay cancer. And nobody wanted to touch it. She had business associates that said, just leave this alone, it's going to destroy your career. She didn't let any of that get in the way. And she battled forward, and it was a battle. And it was at a time when people were dying because there were some new treatments on the rise, but they hadn't been approved. But people were dying. And she did whatever it took to get those medicines to the people, selling jewelry because it couldn't be traced. She didn't care about her own personal safety or security, any of that. And she inspires us to take action and not wait. When Katrina hit, it was immediately she went into action. It was, there are people who are not going to be able to access the treatment they need. She got those mobile vans, those medical units in remote places and saved lives, and she's continuing to do this in Africa. Something that is frightening with HIV/AIDS is there is a very disturbing passivity around this, because we do have medicines. Before Elizabeth, people were dying of AIDS. Today, people are living with HIV. Many people cannot afford these medicines. We're finding that this generation of young people are much more careless. They're not thinking about it. And while we're sitting here, in the next hour, 230 people will be infected with HIV. More than that, when we think about around the world, when we think about the atrocities that are happening with ISIS, Boko Haram, other terrorist organizations, when we think about the refugee camps in Jordan, in Iraq, and Germany, it's frightening. And Elizabeth knew that most people in the world, we're so isolated here in America. We don't often think about what's going on. But most people in the world don't have access to the life-saving medicine, and they are dying. And her work, these vans, they're now in Africa.
Right,
and
right.
she is doing incredible work.
So if you can think back as to what she did, and at what point did AIDS become less shameful to talk about and become a little bit, wow, this is an important topic, almost cool to talk about. Tell us about how she pushed that over the edge.
She did this by persevering, by believing in it. She just refused to let anyone's barriers stop her. People were afraid to touch someone who was infected with HIV, thinking that it could be contagious. And Elizabeth was in the hospital. She was hugging people. She said, nobody's going to die. If we don't have the cure yet, they're not going to die without knowing that they are loved. And her courage was contagious. And she led the way. Elizabeth is the Joan of Arc of AIDS. And it was through her leadership that we have this. But we cannot, Elizabeth would say, do not stand idly by. There is an urgency to this because people are dying.
Now, how did you come to work with AIDS and with Elizabeth? Did it start because you were of your friendship with Elizabeth, and then she drew you into the campaign for AIDS, or how did that happen?
Well, before I knew Elizabeth, her work, of course, was on my radar, and our family would participate in the AIDS walks. Coming to know Elizabeth and being part of her life in such a powerful way, that you can't help but be forever changed when you know this extraordinary woman. And her team is extraordinary. Elizabeth founded AMFAR, and when she learned that there were limitations there, an incredible organization that she supports, but she went to found the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. 100% of the proceeds goes to the people who need it, to the beneficiaries. She set up her trust in such a way that the trust pays for all of the overhead. Incredible people, Joel and Barbara and Tim, her family, running this, and she entrusted them. She gave them instructions for the future, because Elizabeth wants to see this generation be HIV/AIDS free. That was the world that she was born into, and that's what she wants to see, and she's even planned for that. So she's directed the monies to be raised to continue to help disenfranchised people.
So what kind of lessons can you draw from the way she ran the campaign, or basically imbued the campaign, to other causes? You're now getting involved in a number of other wonderful causes, including, you mentioned trafficking when we earlier spoke. What lessons can you draw from her, other than the fact that, there is no other Elizabeth Taylor? So what does one do without someone like her?
We can continue to learn from Elizabeth. She left us so much to learn from her example. And she said, I will not be silent. I will not be quiet. I will continue to fight. And to not let anyone shut us down, to not allow anyone to dismiss us. That's something we can learn from Elizabeth. Her laser focus allowed her to really reach people in a powerful way. I think sometimes people can spread themselves too thin, but really having an objective of who do I want to help, who needs help the most. That was Elizabeth's focus.
And so how have you been able to pull those learnings into the cause for trafficking or some of the other causes that you also are involved in?
I serve as ambassador for the YWCA Greater Los Angeles in the fight against human trafficking and the sex slave trade. And another courageous woman, Faye Washington, who is the leader of that. And Faye reminds me so much of Elizabeth in so many ways. She battles forward, and she doesn't let anyone stop her or shut her down. It is heartbreaking that human trafficking is occurring in all 50 of our states. Super Bowl Sunday is the biggest day for the sex slave trafficking trade, and it is heartbreaking. There is an estimated 32 million slaves on Earth today. It is the fastest growing illegal business. Unlike drugs, human beings are able to be sold over and over. And tragically, when human beings are no longer profitable in the sex slave trade, and we're talking about the majority of this is women and children. When they're no longer profitable, they're frequently sold into forced labor. And that is why everyone who is involved in any way, shape, or form, we run a design and marketing firm, how things are being accomplished is of critical importance. We have the strictest human rights contracts that I'm aware of. If anybody else has a stricter one, I need to know about it. People break the law. And even if something is not illegal in a country, if it breaks our code of ethics, we need to find out. I've had people say, don't talk about this, because there will be an incident where somebody will be making one of your products, one of your designs, and they'll be breaking the law or breaking your contract, and it will hurt your business. My response to that is, whatever the motivation, if it's a competitor, whatever their motivation, that's irrelevant. My response is thank you. If you can bring attention to that and we can make a change, we have a chance. It's stopping an atrocity. One of my biggest mistakes early on in business is my fear of growing our company too quickly, because I feared, how will we be able to control what's going on in the factories? In maturity, I recognize that with growth and success, we have leverage. So if somebody is breaking our contracts, and if we're small, they can dismiss us. You know, we don't care. We're going to continue to do what we want to do. We don't need you. But if we have some leverage, if we have access to the media, if we have influence on other brands, we can initiate positive change. So back to Elizabeth and what she's doing, and this ties together because people in sex slave, the rate that they're being infected by HIV is astronomical.
Right. Well, actually, I'd like to get back a little bit to the commerce side of things, because in some ways, commerce can also be a form of advocacy. So if you're in your marketing, you're actually telling people that this product is the result of fair labor contracts. I don't know if it's fair trade or whatever, but that's a form of advocacy, isn't it? And is it effective?
Yes, I believe it is effective. I mean, and I believe it's important. I also believe there is so much to do. And whether we market it or not, getting the word out there, being alert, I would say more than anything, a heightened alertness. So wherever we are, here in America, in all 50 states, if we see something that doesn't look right, if we're in a restaurant, checking into a motel, and we see someone and there's something in their eyes, we've got to step up. And you can text Be Free. It's a 24-hour hotline, and we need more awareness, and we need to. Elizabeth taught us to galvanize, and this is something that she felt passionately about, and there's so much to learn from her.
Well, so Elizabeth is a very special, celebrity, and so with someone like, when you're working with the YWCA and with Faye Washington, what kind of tools does she use to advocate on behalf of her cause?
Faye?
Yeah.
Faye uses everything she's got, and she's fearless. She is absolutely fearless. She gets the government involved. She gets the technology arm of government involved. How can we use something that has been used for harm to actually help protect these girls and boys who are being targeted? Bringing awareness, getting law enforcement involved. She galvanizes churches and groups to really come alongside these girls, safe houses. There is so much to do and so little time. And I feel blessed to be exposed to needs that can feel overwhelming, that are so much larger than me, and also to be exposed to great opportunity.
Well, so the White House, President Obama once did invoke sex trafficking as something, the sex trafficking initiative for the White House, but it didn't seem to go anywhere. How important is it to get the administration, to get White House, to get Washington involved in an issue, to bring it to the surface?
It would help tremendously to have the support of the government involved. We need that. We need that. There was a campaign when the girls were taken by Boko Haram, you know, bring back our girls. Wonderful. Our girls are still gone. They're in captivity. They're being raped relentlessly. And we need to, there's so much we need to do.
Right, but have you found that it is important to actually involve Washington in some of in the issues that you are involved?
Yes, yes, absolutely. The government can help. There have been some laws that have changed, that have been improved. We have more information in emergency rooms, for example, what to look out for. And that's been very helpful. What Elizabeth did with the government, with HIV/AIDS, bringing national awareness, bringing attention to that. So much to learn from her example.
Right, well, thank you very much. This has been very interesting, and I really
you.
appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.